Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Gio and Joey Show with a special guest. Joey, how you doing? Introduce our guest and the topic we're about to talk tonight.
Yeah, I'm better. I'm doing better than I deserve. Our guest is Carlos, and you guys will remember him. He was on a while back when we did an episode on futurism. But we had a conversation this weekend that I thought was worth bringing to the audience, and so we're having him back. But Carlos, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for asking.
Hi, Joey. Lead us off.
Yeah, as most people watching this probably know, this past weekend was America Fest, and it got off to a spicy start because Ben Shapiro he wasn't holding anything back. And I what I appreciated about his speech is for me it seemed like it was a little overdue housekeeping for the conservative movement. I think anyone who kind of objectively looks at the scene currently in the media space on the right will notice that there's a lot of people who are grifters who don't seem to have an affinity for the truth. And if we're being completely honest, and I think we need to talk about this, are delving into some morally dangerous waters. And so I appreciated Ben Shapiro. By the way, Ben Shapiro's someone he's been a conservative, columnist since he was like 17. He's someone I've been following a long time. I do think he's a man of principle, and I was very appreciative of his speech. But it ignited some backlash, and so that's kind of hence the title of this episode tonight, "The Conservative Civil War."
So, Carlos, did you catch any of it? And what'd you think of Ben Shapiro's speech if you did catch it?
Yeah, I watched the whole speech. I watched the whole
Hmm.
speech, and I did appreciate Ben Shapiro mentioning this stuff, and I do think it's overdue. But it kind of gets into a deeper problem, which has to do with you know the conservative movement hasn't really been taking in the criticisms that it needed to early on, but you're now seeing the fruit of that coming to fruition 10 years later. And
Hmm.
so uh, that's some of my insight with what's going on right now. And that's the problem whenever you have yes men, whenever you're just, you're not taking in the criticism, but dismissing every single criticism, with the left, with all its, different things and such. There is a level of truth that you cannot completely dismiss. And so, likewise, with real life, you can't just dismiss the criticisms you may receive as a leader. You have to, think critically through it. And so, the conservative movement hasn't really done that for 10 years, especially the president. But yeah, it's kind of a fruit of what's been building up for 10 years and it's been ignored. And so that's what I see happening right now.
As I watch the speech and then I watch some of the other speeches, I was talking to Joey about this off air. Is that I hate how the people he called out, especially the people he called out, the Megan Kellys, the Tuckers, the Bannons, the Candace Owenses, are all trying to reframe his speech into something he didn't say. He didn't call to
Mhm.
deplatform anybody, but he called for moral clarity, and it says a lot to me about their characters when they're trying to straw man his speech into something it wasn't, so they could defend themselves and try to garner support for their fail morality, really. And so
Mhm.
you know, that's my point there. Joey, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe if you pull up the David, I always forget how to pronounce his name, but the David Riaboy tweet, because I thought he laid it out pretty well. Because obviously we're not going to have the clips and the whole speech. Although I recommend
Mm-hmm.
everyone after you watch this, go and watch Ben's America First speech, not America First, America Fest
Yeah.
speech. It was really good. It's worth watching. But I thought David did a really good job of laying out how the difference between Ben and the people he was criticizing, their responses. Because
Mm-hmm.
what Ben did in his speech is he laid out what the moral responsibility and duty of people like him and the people he's talking about who are in the media that they have, right? So in other words, it's not just about how many views you can get and how much money you can get with your podcast, but you actually have certain moral duties. And I think the number one he said was like the most important thing was you have a duty to the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right. So trafficking and like accusing, Erica Kirk or Turning Point or the French government or
Yeah.
Mossad or
Egypt.
even
Yeah.
U.S. government, right, of being implicated in I don't know what, some sort of grand conspiracy between all these
Mm-hmm.
parties to take out Charlie Kirk, when all the evidence points to um,
Tyler
whatever that kid,
Robinson.
Tyler Robinson,
Mm-hmm.
some deranged left wing kid who
Furry.
got down that path, right? That's what it points to, and yet the more viral thing to do is what Candace is doing. Obviously, I never, because I haven't watched her in years, and so I never really saw her in my feed a whole lot till after Charlie's death, and then she's like the number one news story
Mm-hmm.
because again, it sells, but it's not about searching for the truth. And I just thought Ben laying out that, hey, no, we in this business, in the media business, we have a moral responsibility to our viewers.
That being said, on that note, let's show a little clip that we have here, Ben's speech.
Let fear of other hosts deter us from telling the truth. So, for example, if Candace Owens decides to spend every day since the murder of Charlie Kirk if Candace Owens decides to spend every day since the murder of Charlie Kirk casting aspersions at TPUSA and the people who work here, who worked with Charlie every single day, his best friends, to cast aspersions at Mikey McCoy and Andrew Colvin and Blake Neff and Tyler Boyer, and yes, at Erica Kirk, and to imply or outright claim complicity in a cover-up over Charlie's murder, to spew absolutely baseless trash implicating everyone from French intelligence to Mossad to members of TPUSA in Charlie's murder or a cover-up in that murder, then we, as people with a microphone, have a moral obligation to call that out by name. Erica Kirk and TPUSA never should have been put in the position to have to defend themselves against such specious and evil attacks, particularly in a time of mourning. And the people who refuse to condemn Candace's truly vicious attacks, and some of them are speaking here, are guilty of cowardice. Yes, cowardice. The fact that they have said nothing while Candace has been vomiting all sorts of hideous and conspiratorial nonsense into the public square for years is just as cowardly.
I know we at Daily Wire, we trust you at
He is, I love that clip because he's spot on. He's spot on. I can't imagine my wife being killed. Or let me not use my example. I can't imagine, let's say, my best friend's wife being killed and having other friends say that my best friend and his family has something to do with it when clearly there's no evidence for it. And for me to say, well, I can't take sides, I'm friends with both of them, that is lack of moral fortitude. And I, look, Tucker, as I told you behind in the green room, I don't care for Tucker or Bannon. But, Megyn Kelly, I enjoyed some of her views, but this was disheartening. Your thoughts, Carlos?
Yeah, whenever I first saw that, my reaction was like, "Oh boy, there's gonna be some clips out of this, man. There's gonna be some real stuff out of this." And I'm like, "Bro, this guy called all these people by name, and that's why all these people were really excited about that was because they were wanting to hear something about some courage, some boldness when it came to this issue. And so it just gets into a deep rooted issue of like there needs to be some form of courage, there needs to be some form of boldness whenever you're dealing with really what it is sin, because it's the spirit of accusation, false accusations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I really appreciated Ben Shapiro,
Mm-hmm.
he's not Christian, he's Jewish, but Ben Shapiro, who he adheres to the Ten Commandments from what he
Mm-hmm.
to his knowledge, and so he is practicing that spirit of you got to defend some of these people. You can't just throw around accusations to left, right, and center. Whenever I was watching all these different videos from all these commentators, and Megyn Kelly, she's trying to go and do this through this thing where she wants to appease both audiences where she doesn't get attacked. But the thing is that whenever you do that, you stand for nothing. You need to be able
Mm-hmm.
to, and there may be a time and place for that, but whenever there's this crisis, you're attacking people, there needs to be some voices that stand up. And so yeah, I really didn't like how Megyn Kelly comes off as very, bold and like, oh, you say this, well, you know, she goes off on a tangent of cussing and everything, and
Yeah.
it's like
Fake courage.
she has that attitude. Yeah, she has that attitude, and not just in this situation, but in others,
Mm-hmm.
where she's a super bold, and it just comes off. You're having an attitude. You want to appear like you're bold, but it just gets people angry.
Go ahead.
Well, and she also made very clear that she lied to her
Mm-hmm.
audience for
Mm-hmm.
weeks
Yeah.
because she had been saying when people would bring up the Candace thing, she would say, "Oh, what's Candace saying? I don't really know what Candace is saying. I'm not paying attention to that." Well, in her response to Ben at America Fest, she said, "I didn't question her, or I didn't try to stop her, and I didn't call her out because I favored her asking the questions."
Mm-hmm.
She said that I favored her asking the
Yeah.
questions. Well, that's proof that you were lying before when you said, "Oh, I wasn't paying attention to what she
Mm-hmm.
was saying." So
And
it's
not only
just
that, she's mad at Ben for, calling her a coward. Where I saw a clip earlier, she, when Ben was on her show, on her tour, where she called Ben a liar. So you can call him a liar, but he can't call you a coward. And at least he said it to your face because he knows you were there. You said it after he was gone. You know what I mean? And so,
yeah.
and look, to me, obviously, X is not necessarily. We all get fed, what we constantly watch. But for the most part, and I don't know, I'll ask you guys. Most of the tweets I saw post this conference have said hands down that Ben's speech was the best of the whole weekend. I hear some people say that JD's was the best, but it's unfortunately people who are trying to kiss his butt, like the leaders of Charlie Kirk's thing, because they're endorsing him for 2028. But from the layperson, Ben's was the best speech all weekend.
Mhm.
That's what I'm seeing on
Without bots.
Twitter.
So among my friends, right, people like I volunteer and do stuff with the Reagan Caucus, right? Among that group, Ben's speech was much appreciated, right? We all much appreciated it, but I definitely saw a lot of the more, at least from my perspective, a lot of the kind of the younger like Gen Z influencers or like the America First crowd. A lot of them were very much siding with Tucker.
No,
Not
that's
all,
sad.
but there's I did see quite a few people,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get into this more, especially as we get later on in this conversation. We get more into the anti-Semitism of it, but I saw a lot of that in the responses to Ben Shapiro's speech.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned and I prefaced my comment with, in my algorithm. That's the word I was looking for, right?
Yeah.
And I'm older, right? I'm 52 years old. You're younger. So in your algorithm, you're seeing that the Tucker. But to me, the Tucker was, first of all, you could tell he got, I don't want to say blindsided, but that he wasn't ready for Ben's speech because he came out basically making nonsense. He's the one who started the reframing Ben's speech as if Ben was calling for deplatforming and none of that. No, he's saying be morally strong and stop being a coward. And what's this notion, because I keep hearing it, and you guys are probably more into it, that he's taking money from Qatar?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, what is it? Yeah. Like, give me a little bit more of the details, yeah.
So whenever he first went to Qatar, he was given $100,000 from Qatar in one of his interviews. After that, I don't know every single detail after that, but I know he just bought a home in Qatar as a recent. So, and he's been saying that Qatar and Russia should be our greatest allies. So that's what I saw.
And I did see that he said that Qatar is better for Christians than Israel, which is a joke.
Which is so ridiculous.
I was in Israel. Yeah. I've said this before. I was in Israel in 2019. And on a Friday night on Sabbath, I was at the Wailing Wall talking to Jews about Jesus Christ. If I go further west into Palestine, I'd be dead within 5 minutes. You know what I mean? And so don't tell me that Qatar, which, I remember, didn't they have like the World Cup there a couple of years ago? Right? The finals was in Qatar.
It was either there or Dubai.
No, it was Qatar. Yeah. It was Qatar. Because when they were building, it's so hot there, people were dying and people were saying on blood money, and then their civil rights or their religious rights is horrendous. And so for him to say that, that's sad to see somebody being bought out like that in plain sight.
The country literally has slaves. Like they have an actual practice of slavery. So
I didn't know that.
Like, the idea that they're some sort of, moral American ally is just, it's ridiculous. But when you're saying that about Putin, right, who's literally, kidnapping thousands of Ukrainian children and repatriating them into Russia and trying to Russify them, right, which is literally definitionally a form of genocide, not to mention all of the war crimes they've committed in Ukraine. But he's like, oh, no, Russia really is a natural American ally. But no, they're not. And anybody who's read like Alexander Dugin, right, would know he doesn't have a favorable view of the West or America. And he's like Putin's pet prophet, right? Like these people are not they're not friends to the United States, right? And so, yeah, I just think Tucker, and he'll talk all the time, right? So anybody who disagrees with him on the right about foreign policy, he'll jump to, well, they're Israel first, or they're paid by Israel, or they'll talk about AIPAC money. Well, first of all, most of the time when he's saying that about his opponent, it's not true. Secondly, AIPAC is American citizens that run it. And third, he's taking money from Qatar, from Russia. How can he criticize these people? It's just hypocrisy.
Calling the kettle black, right? All right, let's watch this other clip. Ben Shapiro once again. Let me get it up.
Oh, yeah, this one's not
no, this is a quote. Yeah, all right, go ahead. Why'd you bring this one up?
Yeah, I just brought it out because he laid, so if you kind of scroll, so he laid down, and this is what was different, and David made this point, that all of the people responding to Ben Shapiro, right, they're mad on all this, but Ben Shapiro actually laid out, dude, he said, listen, this is a standard for you to hold me by, right, really is what he was saying, hold me to this standard. Hold the other people you're watching to the standard. I would say to the Christians and the Adventists and stuff watching this, be very careful about the media you consume. I think the rules that Ben lays down, I think they're really good rules.
Let me read them here real quick. Not the whole tweet, but just one. Truth. Right? Truth has to be number one. Principle, not personal feelings. That's where you should be able. Oh, and I wanted to add this earlier while we were talking. to me, after Ben spoke and then hearing everybody else mischaracterize his speech and then catch feelings, the verse that comes to mind is the verse where Paul says, "Have I now become your enemy for telling you the truth?" Right? And you can see that they know he's right, but pride and ego are having, to defend themselves. So principle, not personal feelings. Responsibility. If you have a mic like Megyn Kelly, like Tucker, like Candace, like Ben, like Matt Walsh, with millions of people, you owe it to them to preach, to be responsible with the truth you're investigating. And then you must have evidence. It's funny. Years ago, I used to do a series titled The Three Angels Message and the Entertainment Industry. And what I had was firsthand sources of what I was showing you, that, the music industry, for example, where Aleister Crowley and all that is very into the occult. However, I stopped doing this series because I would then get a whole bunch of weirdos giving me 1,000,001 conspiracy theories with no evidence. And I was like, well, Lord, maybe you're telling me that the fruit of this series is not what you want. So I stopped doing it and now I don't get all these crazy conspiracy theories coming my way because you have to have evidence. That's what he's saying. And then lastly, just don't point out the problem. If you are in a power of influence, try to find a solution and work for a solution. And I love those 5 points. And I think in all these 5 points, Tucker Carlson fails. Megyn Kelly fails, although she gets the closest out of the ones I'm mentioning. Steve Bannon's a joke. Candace Owens is nuts. And so out of those 4, Kelly gets the closest, but she's failing in truth and in principles, not personal feelings, and solutions, really, or responsibility at this point. Mercy.
Right.
So go ahead. Your thoughts.
So, you brought up some of those names. One person that comes to mind that you didn't mention was JD Vance.
Oh,
And if you
yes.
saw his speech, and you saw his speech, so he's trying to do what Gavin Newsom is doing on the left right now. But the truth is that JD Vance, he's a Catholic integralist. And there's I don't know if he's how deep he is into that, but I do know in that sect of the American right, there is a lot of anti-Semitism that circulates in that sphere. And I don't know how much that anti-Semitism within that circle is influencing or reshaping how he's viewing things right now. Because he is a recent Roman Catholic, so I don't know what he knows. I don't know everything he knows, but I do know he leans towards that. And so, whenever he gave that speech about we're not going to deplatform people. We're one big tent. But the truth is that because about a year ago he denounced Nick Fuentes, but a year later he, especially since this year, things have kind of shifted, subtly at least. And so I could see that not just with them, but even with probably the most likely person to become the Republican primary, this individual has he wants to invite these people in, these anti-Semites, the Groypers, and so, and I know the Groypers, Nick Fuentes followers, they've been working on trying to make JD Vance, trying to appeal to their ideas.
Yeah,
And
but
so
didn't Fuentes call his wife? And I don't want to say the word, but what does that mean exactly? If you can give it to me in a kosher way.
It's an insult to Indian people.
Okay.
That's one thing. One of the major points has been a lot of racism towards Indians that's kind of circulated on the internet among this crowd. Again, the thing is, I don't think a majority of normal. Listen, I'm consider myself a part of the conservative movement, right? If it's being defined by like Buckley, Reagan, Frank Meyer, right? These guys. I don't think it's a majority at this point, but I think it's a growing minority. And I think what Ben did, honestly, I would have liked to see it a lot sooner with more people. I mean, I think Ben has never been, he's always been willing to call out that crowd. I mean, like part of Nick Fuentes' whole story is he was mad and upset because Ben called him out, you know, back in the 2016 cycle. So Ben has always been clear on these issues. And I appreciated his stand here. But the one thing, and I debated, obviously there was other clips that we could have brought up, but the other person I just want to give a shout out and a positive, someone who I've been very critical of, because I think his behavior in the Republican primary was not great, right? I don't think he was honest with his attacks on people like Nikki Haley. But I'm just going to be honest, Vivek Ramaswamy at the America, he's been really good. And so last week he published an article in the New York Times about America as a creedal nation, right, where we reject racism and anti-Semitism. He's good on that. And his speech at America Fest was also very good. And so I will give him props for that. But the reason why he came to my mind is because you pointed out how Nick Fuentes has said awful things about J.D. Vance and his wife. Well, J.D. Vance has not actually come out and defended his wife. Vivek Ramaswamy did at the in his America Fest. He literally said someone who called Usha Vance, you know, this word, right, can't be a part of the conservative movement, right? People who don't like Jews. And so, like, Vivek was showing more moral clarity about the vice president's own. For me, that is another thing. Like, maybe I'm old fashioned, but like, a man should defend his wife, right?
I think so too.
And if you don't, like, even without everything else, that would be like a major red flag for me deciding to vote for you. It's like, you're a man who won't defend your wife's honor. Like, who does that? And I think it's because I don't think J.D. Vance is himself. Obviously, I don't think he's anti-Indian. Right? His kids are half Indian. His wife is. I don't even think J.D. Vance is anti-Semitic. I don't. I'll just be honest. I don't think he's anti-Semitic. But I think he knows that he needs the Groyper
every
base.
Vote.
He needs the radicals. And so he's not willing to do, you know, like what Bill Clinton did in the 90s, the Sister Soldier moment where he turned on the far left. He's not willing to do something similar. And so I hope it hurts him. I think I would much rather have a principled conservative because I have many issues, and we could go the whole episode on what Carlos brought up about his ties with integralism. I guess all I'll say about that is everyone should go and watch my friend's channel. They're both Catholics, but Thomas Howes, who's been on our show, and James McPatterson, who ran the Why Post-Liberalism Failed. And they just show the history that Carlos was alluding to, where these integralist ideas, right, it's not all Catholics, but it is a strain of Catholic history that is very much mired in anti-Semitism. And so the Groypers are really a long line of this history.
That being said, you have here in our queue, you know, a clip of Candace Owens spewing, who happens to be, she happens to be Catholic, spewing anti-Semitism. You were going to say before I cue it up?
Yeah, I was just going to warn everybody, right? This is a rough translation from the German.
Oh, okay, mercy.
About Charlie Kirk and cares to. I am done with it. This one is so fully off of the mother effing plantation. Truly, Ben Shapiro, fuck you and the midget horse that you rode in on.
You needed to warn me there was
on behalf of the
on
world. I know you're going to get applauded by Konstantin Kisin and Andrew Christ is King Clavin and all of the people, the men who have to keep applauding what you do like you're a 4-year-old to make you feel good. But the rest of the world can't stand you. You're obnoxious. You have absolutely no values that exist outside of the Talmud. You describe yourself as a Talmudic Jew, and I've learned what's in that Talmud, and I encourage other people at home to learn what is in that Talmud so that you know what Ben thinks of you, because he doesn't just hate me, he hates you too, white men. He hates all black people, okay? If he's following the rules of the Talmud, I mean, when I say hates, they think that we're animals, that they have a right to own us, that they have a right to make us worship them, that they have a right to lie to us, that they have a right to sue us and take everything that we have, that they have a right to deceive us. that they have a right to treat Charlie the way that he treated Charlie while he was alive, only to then try to defraud the population into thinking that he is somehow a part of his legacy, that he somehow cared about Charlie Kirk and cares to protect the people that are working at Turning Point USA. Goodbye, Ben. Goodbye. Question is, how much more money is Ben Shapiro going to spend to make people think that he's popular? How many more articles is his father going to write under a pen name, Hank Berrien of the Daily Wire, under the pen name Hank Berrien, as he wrote while Ben was at Breitbart, before he turned his back and betrayed them too, because that is his nature. One of these belly creatures, sliver on. The question is, how many more weeks and years do we have to keep pretending like Ben Shapiro is relevant? It's an open-ended question. Of course, what followed Ben Shapiro on stage is somebody who Charlie Kirk loved very much and who he fought for to the very end against the Jewish donors who were pressuring him, some of them because Ben Shapiro insisted that they do. That is Charlie Kirk's true legacy, and that is Charlie Kirk's true friend, just as I was and am and will continue to fight and ask questions about who killed Charlie Kirk.
Do I need to
And
play
people that are
more
at
of
home,
this?
I implore you to wake up to these people who believe that they are
Not really.
contract lords. I challenge
I
Black
think
Americans
the point has
to
been
wake
clear.
up to
Yeah,
your true
she
history,
is.
because your quarrel
Well,
is not
I don't
with
listen to her, but she is. Bad vibes.
I just want to say about that book that she lifted up. That
Yeah,
book is
it's
written,
debunked.
debunked by some priest who was very clearly, even the Catholic Church has like distanced himself from the guy. Is very, very much an anti-Semite and a radical. But you notice what she's doing, right? So she has this beef with Ben, and she's bringing it back to his Judaism to try to get. And this echoes. I mean, so it's easy to dismiss Candace as a loon because she's loony, right? I'll just be honest. There's not a lot of intellectual heft there, right? Like she's not going through these great books, right? Like but I think why it shouldn't be dismissed so easily is because I think these ideas are growing.
Yeah, she's
particularly among
appealing. She's
younger
appealing to a corner of the people that actually believe this. But this is nothing new, right? Anti-Semitism has been around for as long as there's been Jews, really.
Yep.
Right? There's been anti-Semitism since a nation has been around. And ironically, right, they claim to serve Christ, and Christ is Jewish. But what bothers me more about Candace is that she never addresses the issues. It's always conspiracy. It's always questioning. And you could look, who was the first one to use questions to deceive?
Satan.
Satan. Has God said not to eat of the tree? Because he knows, right? So questions
I'm
aren't
just
always
asking
innocent.
questions.
Yeah, exactly. Satan could be like, I was just asking questions. And questions aren't always just questions. They come with something, unless you're really curious, right? But when you are truly curious and looking for truth, your questions are based on seeking for truth, not conspiracy. Just my thoughts.
So Carlos, I know one thing that you had mentioned to me is in your generation, right? People you've gone to school with and stuff, you had noticed some of these radical views. Could you kind of enlighten our audience about that a little bit?
Yes. So, and so I went to public school most of my life. Teenager at I went to Morton Ranch High School, but then I went to a private academy, Adventist Academy, my last year, my senior year. But since I've been back in Houston, I've noticed that reconnected with a lot of my friends from public school. And one of the things that I noticed is that they're into this stuff. They're into this stuff. And some of these people have become more new agey in their thinking. Or some of them became more Christian nationalists in their thinking, or conspiratorial. It goes in all different kinds of groups. Because you do have some of that on the left as well. This kind of like, oh, the Jews are controlling everything. You find that on both the left and the right. And so it was like a 5-year gap between me leaving Houston and then returning to Houston. And it's like, this isn't just something you're just seeing on the internet, because I go to my feed, I see this stuff all the time. But there is reality to it, because I'm seeing the equivalent of this kind of anti-Semitism, not just online but in real life. But also on when I went to Southern as well, and while I was at Southern Adventist University, you know, I mean, it really wasn't talked too much. It was the year 2023, whenever all that Hamas stuff started.
Mm-hmm.
But it really started here in 2025 when I began seeing a lot of my friends listening to Nick Fuentes, America First, um, where even young adult Adventists, um, because they really haven't been trained, to be frank, and to think things through really a biblical Adventist lens.
Mm-hmm. A
They
worldview,
don't
yeah.
like is yeah, and so it's kind of like even in university, an Adventist university, they're embracing these ideas of the Jews controlling the world. The Jews this, and I've had to talk to some of them about it. I've talked to some of them about it, and they were like, "Oh, okay, I didn't know that." But what really, for me, what helps them to realize where it's all leading to is how before even Charlie Cook's Sabbath book was coming out, I knew in hindsight that this stuff was going to lead to this anti-Semitism would lead to anti-Sabbath sentiment, and I pointed that out. I brought up some historical, you know, things. You see this throughout history, where each and every single time there's this rise in anti-Semitism, Christian Sabbath keepers are accused of being, secretly Jewish, crypto Jews. That's kind of what you hear
Judaizer.
throughout history. And so I remember as a teenager, I was into these conspiracy circles. I would hear a lot about these, Zionism and all this stuff before it was ever mainstream. So I was familiar with this stuff to begin with, and I knew there was anti-Sabbath sentiment within those circles. I debated with people. I dealt with people who were trying to connect Adventism with Freemasonry, and because they were connected to Freemasonry, quote unquote, there's a whole conspiracy with that. Oh, that means they're also connected with the Jews and things like that. And so I knew from my previous background as a teenager with this stuff where it would lead to, but I brought this stuff out, but especially after the Charlie Kirk Sabbath book came out, you began to see where what I was warning about became more prominent, where people were associating, the Sabbath is a Jewish plot to be cemented into the churches right now. There's this whole thing called Operation Sabbath Shalom.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
so
saw that. Yeah. Yeah, it's on a side note, the Kirk Cameron thing, right, with hell, and people saying that he's apostatizing because he no longer believes in eternal conscious torment. And I sit back, right, because I don't have access to these people, even though I made a couple of videos, and I think to myself, if they only knew that the one they're calling a heretic is actually more biblically correct than they are. And it's the same thing with people saying that the Sabbath, the Jews are using it to subvert Christianity. If they only knew what the Bible actually says about the Sabbath. And before we go on, I just saw this come up on my tweet feed, kind of what we were talking about here with JD Vance. It says this: Vance always does this. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Who can say? I'm not here to judge routine. I guess he imagines this comes off as heroic and unifying, but it's actually incredibly cowardly and the furthest thing from true leadership. And that's, I think, spot on, right? Because there are certain things that you cannot see that are morally clear. To blame, Charlie Kirk's business and implying even his wife without any evidence and to not call that out, did we lose people? Are we still streaming here? There we are. What happened here? Right? Mm. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, it kicked me out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so yeah, did you get to see the tweet? Right?
I did not.
Yeah, it was a tweet basically saying that JD Vance making this, oh shucks. I'll read it again. Vance always does this. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Who can say? I'm not here to judge routine. I guess he imagines this comes off as heroic and unifying, but it's actually incredibly cowardly and the furthest thing from true leadership.
Yeah,
And it's true. You have to be
leader is not
able,
what I would call JD Vance.
yeah, you have to have moral clarity. And I don't see how accusing, TPUSA and Erica Kirk as the murderers behind Charlie Kirk's death and not call that out because supposedly you're friends. Look, I told my kids in a conversation, and I'll joke around with you guys, but I was serious. We saw a video where it's actually talking about the Charlie Kirk thing when it first happened, and how the parents turned them in. And I told my girls, if you ever commit murder, I'm turning you in. You're going to jail, right? I told them straight up, and because God is no respecter of person, right? And we aren't to be respecter of persons. That doesn't mean I would stop loving my daughter like this killer Robinson's parents. They still love him, but they did the right thing. And we need to be able to call out foolishness if we have the microphone to do so. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead,
The
Carlos.
yeah, that kind of ties back with what we said earlier about JD. You have to keep in mind also that JD is very good friends with Tucker, very good friends, and so
He has his job because of
he,
Tucker.
and so there is a bias for him. There's an interest at least for what he's doing there. But even then, it doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, I mean,
But
look,
I would
buying somebody, usually when we talk about bribes, they're usually cash. Well, cash is not the only way you can bribe somebody, right? If you feel you owe them because they got you your position, then it's coming with strings, and it shouldn't, right? We should do things for other people regardless of strings attached, and we need to be able to call this stuff out.
Yeah, Tucker's an interesting guy. He always says things. He always acts clueless whenever he's
Confronted.
something's brought up. Yeah, whenever he's confronted, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I think this conversation matters so much to Christians, obviously, because I think it's good for us just in our media practice, like if we're listening to the news or whatever, that we're holding the people that we're listening to accountable. I think the rules that Ben lays out are good. But more than that, like I see what's happening on the right prophetically, in a sense that, listen, the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence, these are some of the best principles of government ever. I believe God led in the formation of this country ultimately so that in the last days there would be a land of freedom and religious tolerance, and not just religious tolerance, but religious freedom as a matter of a fundamental right, so that his final message could go out to a sin-sick world. And America has been that for the vast majority of its history. Not that it's been perfect. Obviously, America has not been perfect, but it has been good. It has been striving, like we talked about with Gary Blanchard last week. America has been a nation with an ideal. And when I see the right that I kind of grew up in, right, the conservative movement, it was very much what it was seeking to preserve was America's principle of constitutional government and ordered liberty, right? Like that's why you go to the Reagan, Buckley, three stools, right? Well, it's a strong national defense. It's a social conservatism. That's the values part, right? Which, like John Adams said, right, our Constitution was
Hey,
made for
hey,
more.
hey, 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 I had it queued up just for you.
Oh, yeah. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other, right? So that's why the social conservatism plank is important to America's freedom, right? Not that, you don't enforce the first tablet of the law, of course.
Mhm.
That's beyond the sphere of government. That's only between a man and God. But you want laws against abortion. You don't want the state to lie about what marriage is, right? These are important things.
And real quick too, what bothers me the most here lately, and it's always bothered me, but you see it more and more and more and more, is these repeat offenders with 2, 3, 4, 5, upwards of 70 arrests, 6 or 7 up to 10 double-digit felonies to be let out because somehow these liberal judges, it's inhumane, or we need to, what's the word? Rehabilitate them. And yet then they end up killing. And you saw the one in Chicago where I don't know if she died, hopefully she didn't, but they put her on fire. Then obviously the young girl in Charlotte. And all of this is repeat offenders. And I saw somebody point out something, and I forgot where it was, where in Israel, right? And I'm talking about biblical Israel, there were really no jails. Sanctuary cities was the closest you got to a jail. But if you left the sanctuary city and your avenger killed you, then that was on you, not on the person. And so, and it's not that, right, we don't live under a theocracy now. It's not that we can't be killing people, but we do have a death penalty, and our laws should be enforced strongly. There's no way somebody with 74 arrests and double-digit felonies should ever be out on the street again. Mainly for themselves and for the public, because a lot of them are not all mentally there. And I think, Joey, you're the one who have said in the past, it's time to bring back the mental asylums.
Yeah, that's true. And like I said, we need a conservative movement, right, that adheres to the Constitution, the Declaration, and these moral principles. But the fight that I see now is I see people like Ben Shapiro, people like I think Allie Beth Stuckey, she was doing this, at least there. But there are people who will still appeal to the Constitution and the Declaration. But I see a growing movement on the right of people who think the Constitution, right, it's a restriction on our power. And when we get into again, we don't have time to get a whole conversation on the post-liberalism. But when we start talking about that and Catholic integralism, that's very much in the school of the American founding was a mistake, and these checks on power, right, are just hindrances to be gotten away of. The left has done that too, right? Woodrow Wilson. I mean, I'm with Jonah Goldberg. Every time he mentions Woodrow Wilson on his podcast, he brings in the Emperor's song from Star Wars, right? Like, terrible guy. The left is not better in this regard. But what we need, like, is a moral conservatism, right? And I think that's I always say a morally good conservatism that believes in the American founding. That's the last check stopping what we see in Revelation 13, right? Because
and before but before we get to the negative of Revelation 13, right? We all three of us, we see the good, right? It is a lamb-like beast. Unfortunately, it will speak like a dragon, right? And so it's there because we have civil and religious liberty. Now is the time to share the gospel. Now is the time to tell everyone that what is coming is going to be thought of as good for the country, but it's actually going to be against God himself. And we have to make sure, and I forgot who was it that said it in one of the America Fest speeches was, unfortunately, I think this was Tucker. So every broken clock is right twice a day, where he talked about how we can't worry if God is on our side. We got to make sure we're on God's side. Who said that? Was it Tucker or Ben Carson?
It was Tucker. It was Tucker.
Yeah.
It was Tucker.
So in that sense, that's good. Obviously, the beginning of the speech was horrible, and most of it. But you got to give him credit with that. It's credit. And we have to make sure we're on God's side and take those 5 principles that Ben have and live them out biblically. Truth, no personal feelings. Oh, but I grew up Sunday worship. That's what everybody does. No, what does the Bible say, right? And we have to be responsible. We have to follow the evidence, and we have to, what was part of that 5? And seek the truth. Go ahead.
Yeah, could you pull up the article that I sent you? Carlos shared this with me, and it's on the anti-Semitism thing, but it's
Yeah.
something that I think it's important for Christians and particularly Adventists to keep in mind. Because to Carlos's point, and I'll let him fill in on this too, but it's very clear that, like, he's right, that from history, right, there have been times where, I mean, again, the Jews have been hated throughout history by many different people and groups, and they've often been scapegoated, right? When there's problems in society, and you think about it, think about what's actually happening with anti-Semitism. A global population of 15 million people, that's all it is, worldwide. 15 million people is being scapegoated for the problems of the entire world, right? There's over 1 billion Muslims. There's over 1 billion Catholics, right? And yet the Jews, this people who, again, I think the Jews need Jesus. I think Muslims need Jesus. I think,
The whole
other
world needs
Christians
Jesus.
follow the full Bible and the full message, right? So, I would say that lovingly to all these groups, including my Jewish friends and my Catholic friends and whatever, my Muslim friends. But this particular Jewish hatred, right? Think about what it is. It's the scapegoating of 15 million people, a minority, for the problems that are affecting the majority, right? And they're being accused of all these different things. Well, the article that Carlos shared with me, I'll let him tee it up a little bit because he is more familiar with it. But how, like, this article, what would you say stood out to you from the article there from Andrews?
So on page 3, of the article, it's on the left-hand column. I think so. Page 3, and let me get out here. So okay, there you go. There you go. So it says you're right there. Perfect. So it says there on the left-hand column, that paragraph that you're seeing right there, is that after more than a year of forced labor, he was set free. So this is talking about um, forced labor against Adventists. It happened quite often that Adventist leaders distanced themselves from Jewish friendly church members or activities. Sometimes they directly rejected Adventists of Jewish origin because they were afraid of being denounced as public enemies by the Nazi authorities if they showed sympathy or provided assistance. Um, Such an appraisal on the part of the authorities, without doubt, would have been negative consequences on the entire church. In the view of the authorities, so this is what the Hitler's government was already viewing of the Adventists. So, in view of the authorities, the observance of the Sabbath and the abstinence of unclean foods placed Adventists dangerously close to Judaism, anyways. So, what this article is saying here is that basically a lot of Adventists, yeah, they didn't do they messed up. They messed up. They messed up.
Yeah.
But and but the truth is, because they were already under scrutiny from Hitler's government, and in order to cover up for any kind of suspicion, they needed to cooperate with any Jewish members of descent that are Adventists ethnically, and so that was kind of a way for the church to get away from themselves being persecuted because they were already suspicious of Adventists, and so you notice that this spirit of suspicion, and you see it connecting it with Candace Owens, connecting it with all these conspiracies, Tucker, and all these different things. The spirit of suspicion that is prevalent in anti-Semitic circles, uh, you know, we have there's time and time again, and great controversy repeats this, that Satan comes with the spirit of suspicion, the spirit of accusation, and things like that. And it would be gullible for us to think that, oh, we're not going to be accused, or we're not going to deal with any accusation of perhaps some of these conspiracies being put on us as well. And
Well,
so the truth
that being said, sorry to cut you off because I have to stop here in 6 minutes. But there's that video that Joey sent me, right? Where the disparaging of the Sabbath by
and etc. You have this book that Charlie's Last Testament. He was just writing it like the morning of his assassination and so on. The book is about the Sabbath. And now, to be fair, I think it might be a good idea to put your phone down for a day or just rest and whatever. But that's, I'm saying too much there. Isn't it just remarkable that you have this like Judaizing of Christianity occurring with Erica, with her ascending, and even the Sabbath itself, it's the closing of the day. I don't know. It's kind of freaky if you start to analyze it, but my prediction is that after they get sick of trotting out Erica Kirk to cry one more time, that there's
these people are sick because look, I've lost, obviously I didn't lose a spouse, but I lost a parent, and life goes on. I still had to work. I still had to be there for my family while I'm grieving. She can't just stay in her home and just cry, right? She has kids. She has an organization to run, and for them to jump on her. But the most important part of that clip was the Judaizing of Christianity. No, first of all, our leader was a Jew. His name is Jesus. I'll introduce you to him. And not only that, he kept the Sabbath all his life. And even after, and I could do a Bible study of that, even after the resurrection and the crucifixion, he warned about, our flight may not be on winter or Sabbath. All the apostles were still keeping the Sabbath in the book of Acts. So these people who with so much, what's the word I'm looking for? Confidence, mock the seventh-day Sabbath, don't realize they're fighting against God himself.
Yeah. And they go for it, Joey. Go for it, Joey.
You go. I'll close out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's just fascinating to me, looking at that. Richard Spencer is a white supremacist, not necessarily Christian nationalist, but white supremacist. But it really just goes to show that whenever the time comes, whenever we are put under the microscope, we may have to deal with the spirit of false accusation, the spirit of suspicion, because the spirit of conspiracy, really. And so we need to be prepared for that. We need to be diligent whenever it comes to that whole issue. And because they're going to tie these things to us, they're going to tie Judaism to us and these conspiracies to us, and we need to be ready for it mentally.
All right, Joey, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah. So what I want to say is about, so in Daniel chapter 12, it says that a time is coming, that's a time of trouble such as never was, right? That is coming, right? So think of all the troublous times throughout history, including the time in Nazi Germany, right, and the Holocaust. Think of the Crusades and the persecutions and the pogroms, and think of all those times. A time is coming before Jesus comes that is a time of trouble such as never was. And Revelation 13, right, it shows us, right, that ultimately it will be in the name of Christianity, it'll be a persecution against the people who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus, right? That's coming. We have, throughout history, we have gotten little glimpses of things. And I think God allows trials to come to try to waken his people to wake up. And so we should look at them, right? Whether it's analyzing the response to COVID or whatever these things, we should look at these things to prepare and make sure our hearts are right for the final trial. Well, from the Germany trial, now I want to be very clear. There were Adventists, though they were dissenters, who very much publicly resisted and privately resisted the Nazi regime, right? Throughout, not just in Germany, but throughout the Nazi occupied areas, right? And so I want to shout out to those, martyrs and heroes. but the official conference in Germany did not handle it right? They, in order to save themselves from persecution, distanced themselves from this group that was at the ire of the persecutors. And I think that's something that, as people of principle, as Christians, we cannot put our desire to escape persecution ahead of fidelity to Christ and to God and to morality, right? The moral thing to do when they're coming for your Jewish neighbors in Germany, the moral thing to do is to put yourself in between them, right? To do what it can, to speak up for them, to stand up for them, to resist their persecution, even if it costs you your life, right? You can, right? And again, I'm not going to say anything about the specific salvation of anyone involved. That's in God's hands. Although I will say it's dangerous grounds, right? It's like it's very possible to avoid persecution and yet wind up in the lake of fire.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just think it's important that we learn this lesson from history. Be prepared, right? When hatred is turned against another group, don't think that by distancing ourselves from that other group, right, that we're going to save ourselves. Because in the end, the real wrath is going to be against those who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. They're going to be blamed for every problem in society, right? And it's going to be against Christian dissenters. And so don't think that you can distance yourself. Like, again, we're told we shouldn't bring a time of trouble upon us before it arises, right? So we shouldn't provoke conflict with people. But don't think that you can escape the persecution by abandoning principle. Because even if you were to escape the persecution, it's not going to be a lovely end for you when Jesus comes.
I'll end with this, right? Even though these are the 5 principles Ben put up, I'm going to give it a twist, right? Principle number 1, he said truth. Well, it's not just logical truth, is Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Principles, not personal feelings. We must go with what's right in the sight of God, even if it costs us our life. Responsible. We have a responsibility to share the gospel with the world. Our evidence must be based on scripture, and we must point people to the solution, which is Jesus Christ himself. If we follow those 5 principles, no matter what comes our way in the last days, no matter how many people hate on us, we will be right by the only person we need to be right with, and that is God. We live for an audience of one and hoping that everybody will fall in love with the one. Until next time on the Gio and Joey Show, be blessed. Thank you.